like to call the meeting to order at 6:03. Present are Tim Petrikis and Tim Keeney, Selectmen. Mike Marinaccio, Chief Financial Officer. Brian Wissinger, Assistant Finance Director. Todd Rowland, Department of Public Works Director. Chief John Roach, Fire Chief. Kim LaFleur. Also in attendance would be Dr. Paul Salva, Dave Marty, and other members of the Long-Term Recovery Committee. First item on the agenda is the Long-Term Planning Committee update. Before they give us the report, I'd like to make a few comments. I would like to compliment the members of the Long-Term Planning Committee for their yeoman work in addressing the many issues associated with the COVID pandemic and their detailed recommendations outlined in their report. All the committee members donated their time, their expertise, and their talent, and we sincerely appreciate these efforts and your contributions. The events associated with COVID were unprecedented, and we learned a lot from this experience. So my kudos, along with the Board of Selectmen, go to the Long-Term Recovery Committee members, Allison Maynard, Dave Marty, Annie Conoyer, Jeff Golden, Dr. Paul Salva, Bill Shapiro, Glenn Reynolds, Bill Meyer, and Tim Keeney. So at this time, we'd like to hear from the Long-Term Committee and their report. I'm not sure who's going to give that. Is that going to be?
But I'll just introduce the chairman and the members in the order they're going to speak.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for that kind introduction. As you know, the committee's been meeting since June. We've had probably between 12 and 14 meetings, probably more so than any other organization in town. And the makeup of the committee has some pretty outstanding people on it, and I think represents some key areas so that we're able to meet and make a report that was presented later this afternoon. And Ann Conoyer, the chairman, is going to kick it off and explain the overview, followed by Glenn Reynolds, our emergency management director, Allison Maynard, Social Security's director, Paul Salva, famed physician and town aficionado, and then Dave Marty. So that's the form, and that's the number and the order of people. And then I'll wrap it up briefly at the end. Thank you.
Okay.
Ann?
Ann, are you there?
I am. I'm right here.
And welcome.
So, as Tim indicated, we've been meeting for some time, oftentimes every week, to get information gathered to kind of bring together what all the units in the town, all the departments in the town did during this pandemic, this protracted event. So it was a lot of information gathering from the various departments, and I assume that everybody got a copy of the report that's in the meeting. It is very long. It is comprehensive. It's not perfect, but it is, I think, a really good document, a historical document that we can utilize as a tool moving forward for any other crisis that the town experiences. I think what the big telltale signs of needs for improvement, one we have already talked about, and that was the communication piece. I know Glenn is going to talk a little bit further about Everbridge and all that it has to offer, but that was something that the committee, independent of the community, really determined to be an issue. And the town itself, the departments, they handled their areas very well. And what we also found was that people do a lot of great things in their own individual areas, and oftentimes they're not told to. Their job description doesn't require it. Obviously this was an unprecedented event, so a lot of people probably were making it up as they were going along, and they just did all the right things and really did whatever they could to meet the unmet needs of the community. And so we tried to document that, and we, as always, there's room for improvement in any system. We've identified some areas that we think have some room for improvement, and we've indicated those. After the executive summary, we just touched on a few areas. A lot has to do with record keeping, job specs, so that people know what their responsibility is in an emergency event. A lot of people were doing things that were not part of their job description. And it was just because they took it upon themselves. However, you have a really strong team right now. That is not always the case, and that's why it's really so important to have job descriptions that indicate that in the event of an emergency, this is going to be your role and responsibility, and you're going to shift over here to help out this unit. And those are the kinds of things we sort of put together. And oftentimes, units don't document. They do great things, but they don't do really good at documenting it. And I think that was evident in trying to bring together all the information, was that, people were they didn't have a lot of detailed information that was already recorded. So it took a lot for people to gather information because it wasn't something that they just, when March hit, they started keeping a chronology. And I think that is really just helpful for an organization to be able to not only help for record keeping, but it helps down the road when you're asking for public and private monies for assistance with FEMA and all of those other areas. There's some of the other recommendations, and I'm just breezing over this because the report is 40 pages long, so it's not something that it is something that, if on a sidebar, if you'd like me to meet with any of you and to go through and cull through it page by page, I'd be happy to do that. One of the other major areas, because social services and fire and EMS, right? Those were our frontline workers. They were the ones handling the unmet needs of the community. And as Paul will talk about, and Glenn and Allison, they'll talk about those areas and all the things that they did above and beyond what they would normally do in a particular year, meeting those needs. So I'm going to turn it over, because I could talk for a long time because there's a lot of information. The report is super comprehensive, but I think we've learned a lot going through this process. I think it'll be a great tool moving forward for any future incidents in the town, and use it as a template moving forward. So with that, I will hand it off to Glenn. If you'd like to jump in, Glenn.
Sure, absolutely. First of all, thank you guys for the opportunity to speak tonight. And, I'm going to go over some of the bullet points that and my position as an EMD learned, and part of this committee. This committee did a tremendous job putting this report together, so kudos to the entire group. So basically, this pandemic is new territory for all of us. We're all learning as we're going along. When Bud and I signed the emergency declaration, they've been signed before, but never to any length of time such as this. The district response was swift. We closed offices, and it was done with everyone's health and safety in mind, not only employees, but the public as well. I'm sure it was inconvenient for some people and stuff, but we adapted, and we made different arrangements for people, and we stayed open, and employees still worked, and were relatively healthy and stuff. As far as emergency services, nothing was ever interrupted. We had an incredible amount of PPE. Chief Roach had, before this even started, had us here at the firehouse. We had a pretty substantial amount here, and we never ran out, and I don't think we'll ever run out for a while. We have tremendous
Don't throw it away.
here at the firehouse. The fire, EMS, and the police continue to work throughout the whole thing. Staff remain the same. Services were never cut or never missed. Calls weren't missed or anything like that. As far as the police go, some services such as fingerprinting, were shut down, but they could go to the troop and get it done there. So again, something a little inconvenient at the local level, but statewide you can still do it. On our end, in the police, a large increase of calls with the staffing staying the same. It was tremendous amount of calls that came in during this whole thing. And one of the biggest drains on the fire side and the EMS side was the prisoners. The COVID positive prisoners all being moved to Northern here in Summers. The fact that we had a third license for an ambulance. Ours wasn't ready yet, so the chief borrowed an ambulance from Enfield. We had a crew dedicated strictly to respond for the prisons, so that we still had 2 ambulances available in town. So kudos to the chief for that insight for that and all that stuff. The schools did a tremendous job with their communications. They talked to, the emails went out regularly. I know Allison might touch on it later, but even when Meals on Wheels were interrupted due to businesses and stuff like that shutting down, they stepped up big time and helped out with that. And as far as all departments of the town, everyone stepped up. Just like Andy said earlier, they went above and beyond outside their job scopes, and everyone did a tremendous job. One of the big issues that we saw was based on listening to the community, that survey that went out, was the communication piece. We have a lot of communication that does go out. However, for some various reasons, whether they don't receive newspapers, they don't have internet access, they didn't see the signs, some people just didn't get the messages. So that's when we started looking into an emergency notification system, and that's when we came up with Everbridge. Everbridge is an emergency notification system that the state uses at a state level. So pretty much those texts that you get, warning you about various things or stuff like that from the state is an Everbridge system. So we have bought into that at the local level, and we're going to be asking everyone to sign up for it, residents, local business owners, so that you guys can start receiving notifications, emergency notifications and non-emergency notifications at the local level. So the townspeople spoke, we listened, and it's a big investment by the town, and we look forward to having a successful system.
Glenn, this is Bud Noor. I want to personally congratulate you on your baptism of fire. That was an amazing performance, and I thank you as well as the other directors.
Thank you. That's it for my piece. I don't know who's after me.
Our next speaker will be Allison Maynard.
All right, good evening, everybody. So, just like every other department, social services had to quickly pivot and figure out how to continue to provide our services to residents in an unprecedented set of circumstances. I had been with the town for approximately 3 months when we shut down due to COVID. So our most critical program is obviously Meals on Wheels. That's a delivery program to homebound seniors where they get a hot meal delivered every day of the week except for Sunday. It's completely volunteer driven, so it's all senior volunteers that deliver to our seniors. So obviously there were several things we needed to change, and we had to change them quickly. So we bought coolers for all the residents, put them outside of their homes so we could start doing contactless delivery. Worked with Glenn to get PPE for all of us. Staff took over all the deliveries, so myself, Christina Fertile, who works in my department, and Jillian Connors, our senior center supervisor. The 3 of us took on all the routes and started delivering them. We also reduced the routes down to Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then the restaurant shut down. So then we had to pivot and figure out a food source. So thankfully, Brian Zapla, we were having those weekly meetings. Out of that collaboration, he said, Allison, we can figure something out. So the school started providing the meals, and that continued all the way through to the end of the school year. July 1st is when we rolled it back over to volunteers and back over to Hometown Kitchen. Unfortunately, it stayed at a Monday, Wednesday, Friday delivery because Hometown Kitchen continues to have reduced hours. As obviously as an affected business, primarily doing sit-down restaurant service, they are not open as many days a week anymore. So starting in February, we are partnering with Community Renewal Team, which provides all the Meals on Wheels for most of the other surrounding towns to provide our meals going back to a Monday through Friday meal delivery service. As far as case management services went, we obviously saw a pretty big uptick in new people. And when I say big, I mean it's relative to how many we served here in Summers, which was about 400 unduplicated individuals this past year. But what was amazing, and kudos to our town for kind of setting us up so that we could be mobile. All of us directors started out with laptops, and I know a lot of my peers, that was a huge issue, was that they didn't have the devices and the technology to transition to home, whereas the next day we were all in our homes, on our laptops, with our internet-based phones, which we plugged into our Ethernet here at my house, and when clients called, they had no idea that I wasn't sitting at Kibbe Fuller. So that was a huge benefit. And then really it became just keeping up with all the different changes of how we administer a lot of state programs like energy assistance. So they were all pivoting, so we had to stay on top of how they were changing their policies and procedures to do all phone-based contactless applications, which isn't ideal, but we figured it out. DPW installed a drop box on the front of the building, gave us plexiglass shields in the office, and so we really were able to seamlessly offer those services. Dial-A-Ride continued to operate as well. We just changed to only critical appointments. Jillian did a wonderful job over at the senior center, pivoting as well. She just had to do like one person at a time on the bus, which continues to be the model. So unfortunately, not as many people can receive the service, but we have 2 bus drivers, and she's gotten really creative on staggering those schedules. And then lastly, Jillian instituted wellness checks to all seniors that were registered with the senior center. So every single day, her staff were calling seniors, going through the list in alphabetical order. And out of that, they were able to identify our at-risk homebound seniors. And she developed a new program in this past November called Summers Senior Voices. And she has about 15 volunteers that now are calling about 80 of those identified individuals on a weekly basis, checking in with them, making sure that they're okay. If they have any high needs, then she'll refer them over to me. And so that's been a really nice outcome of the process she went through over the summer. And so now we just kind of ebb and flow. Like over the summer, we were seeing people. Now we've kind of scaled it back again. But for the most part, we were able to continue to provide services just in a different way.
Great. Thank you, Allison. Our next presenter is Paul Salva, who's going to talk about one of the key recommendations of the report.
Thank you. I'm sitting at Dave Marty's house because my computer decided to go on vacation before I wanted it to go on vacation. And don't anybody make anything out of me sitting next to Dave Marty at his house.
Wow.
That's the first recommendation.
Is he going to take you to the Pitbull concert? That's what I want to know.
No, we're not on the Pitbull concert. Thank you for asking in advance.
That's funny.
Part of the process that we looked at was the overall system of services provided by the town and also the people providing the services. And you can't have one without the other. And as a number of people have said already, this situation, our EMS services have been absolutely astounding. And they certainly have stepped up in previous emergency situations, which at most lasted 7 to 10 days, maybe 2 weeks at tops, going back to the ice storm where half the trees in New England came down on us. But this is now we're approaching a year here. We're in month intent of this process without the light at the end of the tunnel being obvious. That has to put a strain on our people who are helping us. So one thing we had decided to do and recommend was that there be a stress questionnaire being administered to all of our emergency EMS police force in the town to make sure that they're okay. These are type A personalities in general, and they may or may not recognize the signs and symptoms of stress in themselves or deny them. And I'm not pointing fingers at anybody because I'm very good at doing that myself. But there's a point at which there's only so much people can put up with before the cracks in their lives start showing, and their service, and also to their families. And I really think this would be, and our committee did as well, that this should be something that needs to be, we strongly recommend that this be implemented for our fire EMS people to protect our protectors, for far more their own benefit than the town's benefit. And that's primarily it. And it should be, we initially stated that everybody should take this. It can be anonymous, however that wants to be administered, but everybody should take this as a first step mandatory, and then at some period of time down the road, at least yearly, in a situation like ours right now, I mean, we've missed the first year already, but we need a 0 point to compare people going forward, and then perhaps, depending on how long this goes, check them again in 6 months to see how they're holding up. And it's these things, I mean, having done this myself in my own profession, they're very, very good exercises, because you don't necessarily realize where you are in the situation until you start, you're given guideposts as to, you think you're fine, but no, you're supposed to be over there. And you're a long way from where, the middle of the bell-shaped curve is. And we want to bring you in. And if anything else comes of this, certainly our communication piece, in terms of recommending that being up and going, I can only ask the selectmen and the other people, the powers that be, that sit down and make these decisions, to make this also part of the process for everyone's good, but most importantly for the people at the tip of the spear. They need to be looked after as well. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Paul, one thing I want to clarify is what the recommendation is a baseline of stress level for each of these employees, so that in the future, when additional tests are taken, it can be compared against the baseline. Is that correct?
Correct. Exactly. And I think right now the fire department has a voluntary system, which I understand, but I really think it needs to be mandatory for everyone's sake. People aren't going to reach out for help. Some just on general matter of pride or whatever, or they just don't realize they need it. And I think that is an area that is that the decision-making process needs to be, I don't want to say taken out of their hands, but for their own good, this needs to happen.
Great, thank you. Our next presenter is the great communicator, Dave Marty.
Okay. In meeting with Kim, we talked about kind of doing an all fronts assault here with the communication, and it starts with the Summer's Connection magazine. We have one that's going to hit the homes on Saturday, and the whole focus of this issue is to talk about the Everbridge and how easy it is to enroll. And as a matter of fact, last night at Rotary Club, everybody at the club enrolled in the alert system in about 1 minute or less.
Yep.
Cool.
And if anybody's not involved right now, I invite you to take out your phone and open up like you're going to text message, and text in 888-777, 3 8s and 3 7s, and then type in the word Summers and hit send. And after you do that, then you're automatically enrolled. You'll get a response back and telling you that you're enrolled in the system. So on the signage we're planning to do in town, we're going to focus on that approach. It seems like that's the primary thing. Everybody has their cell phone with them all the time. If you download the app or you go to the website, you can sign up whether you want home phone, LAN, cell, internet, emails. But with the text thing, it's just very, very simple to enroll. So, but
If I may interject, you can even do it on a flip phone.
All right.
And then on top of that, all the other channels in town, the town radio station, the 3 community boards around town. We're going to do up some little flyers also to have available, and give them out to posters to have at the different retailers in town, and have available at Summers. And Kim and I even talked about getting some of the civic organizations involved, Rotary Lions, the Boy Scout, Girl Scouts. Maybe even have like tables on the weekends at Summers, out front of Summers, to make sure people are aware of it, getting on
Churches.
the wall. So
Yeah.
it's an all
Churches, excellent.
it's an all fronts assault process here. So
Absolutely.
our goal is to get the majority of the folks in town enrolled. And one thing too is that there's a core base that we started with. That the Everbridge system came with all the white pages and yellow pages in town. So that's already loaded in there.
That's like
But the
38
problem is
hundred.
that there's fewer and fewer landlines and home lines. So I feel very confident with what we're planning to do, that we're going to have real good enrollment.
Yeah, the key here is the enrollment and the PR effort to get people to sign up. Because while the system is effective, if people don't sign up for it, there are going to be those people that don't have the communication that they need.
Exactly.
Yep.
Great, thank you, Dave. And I just wanted to wrap up by basically taking off from what Annie said, that the committee's focus has been not only on this emergency, but on other crises that could come up in the future, and that the whole concept here is to present a template going forward that could be useful to the community regardless of what the emergency might be. So the work that's continuing now for the committee will be planning on community emergencies that might occur in the future, focusing on such things as mitigation, sustainability, economic recovery, and coming up with a process to determine what the unmet needs might be, and then of the community during the crisis, and how to manage the needs and how to meet them. So that's pretty much the presentation, Bud.
Okay.
Very good.
I do want to make a couple other comments. I've read with interest this report, and I'm in favor of supporting all the recommendations. And we as a board can meet separately to discuss how we implement those. I've been in business a long time, and I've always said the sign of a successful manager are those managers that can handle crises. And I have to say publicly, I'm very proud of all the directors and the managers we've had here in Summers to address this unprecedented crisis. And again, thank you for all your efforts, and thank you again to the Long-Term Recovery Committee for their yeoman work in putting together this report, which has meaning, and we'll make certain we implement the recommendations. Any additional comments from the committee?
Bud,
Yes, sir.
one last quick comment that we didn't discuss here is that one of the reasons Everbridge was picked is that there's expandability with it.
Right.
That there's an opportunity like in town, and I know Kim said she's already taken advantage of it, that if you want to communicate to all the town employees, you can do it right through Everbridge. And then down the road, there's the opportunity like for the senior center or the Parks and Rec or the library, these different category departments that have a subset of the whole population, that they can be spoken to it through this system also.
Absolutely.
But we also have to keep in mind that we need to be careful that we don't over-communicate, because you don't want people to unsubscribe because they're feeling they're being badgered.
Yeah. CT
So,
Alert is suffering from losses from that. So.
Yeah. That's a good point. We're all bombarded every day with false information, also with people trying to sell us something, and as a result, we don't even respond to it. So if it's made clear it's an emergency response operation initially, and then we can add these things in pieces to the point where we get pushback, I think that's a good approach.
Yeah, excellent.
And Bud, I'd like to express my thanks to the committee and to Selectman Tim Keeney for shepherding it through the board as well. It's been a good project. Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll, gentlemen, we'll meet separately to discuss these recommendations and how we implement them, of course, with a timetable. Glenn Reynolds did mention that we just recently submitted the emergency operations plan, and we can expand that to include things like the pandemic. So I think we have the basis for a successful plan going forward, but let's refine it and improve it. Okay?
If I could just say one more thing. Many of the recommendations are related to emergency management and response. One thing that we did do is we had sent out a business survey, and what we had found going through that process is that we don't have a really good handle on all the businesses in the town, and that we felt that it was really important to highlight that piece of it, because there's sort of these two pockets of people, right? You have your community and you have your businesses, right? You have the individuals and then you have the businesses that make up your town. And going through this long-term recovery process, it's sort of broken into those two areas to identify the unmet needs of both areas. And they're very distinct and different. And what we had found was that we didn't have a really good handle on how to, well, we know how to reach out to these people, but because the documents that we had, the directory was outdated, we used what we had to send it out. But we feel that building relationships with the businesses and showing that the town is there to support them in a crisis such as this, that we're recognizing that they have unmet needs as well, and that putting together resources and trying to help them through the process that they had to go through as well during this time. You know, some businesses thrived, of course, but there were, you know, a good majority of businesses were sucking wind. Yeah. And, you know, addition to this, we did show Allison put together a chart from the Department of Labor that shows the unemployment levels and how it spiked over the summer and has since come down a little bit. We don't have December's numbers, but it does show this big bell in the height of COVID. And so, you know, we're talking about people and businesses alike. So I think we just need to keep those two areas in mind when we're moving forward to create policies about addressing unmet needs, that we need to keep that business community piece too, because successful businesses equal successful towns, right? I mean, it's all one and the same. So I just wanted to add that piece to it, because most of the other recommendations are really emergency related, and this piece of it was really just more about creating a system and a way to build relationships with the business community as well.
I noticed one of the other recommendations, Anne.
Yeah.
Was,
Anne, thank you for bringing. Anne, yeah. Anne, thank you so much for bringing something I should have covered. So, thank you for doing that. And as a parting comment too, I want to bring up something that Anne had stressed in the meetings that I thought were very important, and that was one of the addendums is a form to fill in details of when an event happens. And I think a key thing is whenever we have anything happen, that everybody in town can document what happens. And there is a form, one of the addendums at the end of the program does spell that out. It's a general form that can be used by any department or any area in town. So first, thank you, Ann, for covering the business piece, because that is a key piece that we don't have a good tool right now to communicate to all the businesses in town. And that is something that needs to be focused on.
You guys keep talking, you're going to nominate it to the Economic Development Commission.
I already got nominated to the Emergency Management Advisory Council. I can only.
I know that before I joined the Board of Selectmen, when I was exiting the Economic Development Commission, we looked at putting an app out for the business community that I think we registered for but never launched. So if there's a way to use Everbridge to connect that community, I'd be all for that. But might be good as a topic for the EDC to discuss as well.
one of the other recommendations that I noticed was that we do have job descriptions here in town, but one of the recommendations was how do we expand that in terms of who's responsible and how do we interface with other directors in terms of crises. I think that's something we can refine. That really struck me, and so we'll make sure we address that also. Any additional comments on the Long-Term Recovery Committee? Again, my thanks to you, Ann, and all the members for their participation and their recommendations. We sincerely appreciate it, which says a lot about our town. Thanks again. You're welcome to stay on if you like for the rest of the meeting. The next order on the agenda is the Cub Scout activity at Camp Iapo. Todd Rowland, are you still on?
Yes, I'm here. If the board had received the email chain between myself and Kathleen Knight, she's one of the heads of the Cub Scout here in town, Cub Scouts here in town, and because of the pandemic, they would like to have their graduation ceremony at Camp Iapo. I explained to her that most of the grounds up there are under a deed restriction. However, looking at the verbiage of the deed restriction, it seems to be in line with what they're proposing. They want to have it in the field so they can social distance the families that'll be coming. And I think it's a good idea. I think it's in line with the intent of the use of Camp Iapo, and they'll follow whatever CDC and state recommendations are in place at that time for the pandemic. This is going to take place in May. They'll have 2 dates, one their primary and then one a rain date. And I'm not seeing a reason not to, but I did tell her that I would like to run it by the board just to get their input and make sure they're okay with it. They will provide a certificate of insurance if we approve this, as any outside use group does for any of our facilities.
Yeah, for the purposes of discussion, but I'll make a motion that we accept the request of Todd Rowland for the Cub Scout activity at Iapo.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, any additional discussions before you vote?
I'd just like to say, I think it's a great use of the facility. When I was growing up in town as a scout, I actually did some activities on Lake Iapo.
Yeah, I would agree. It's great use of it. I went to the Blue and Gold either last year or the year before at the lodge that they have, and clearly having that outdoors is a much better idea this year. So if there's no reason not to, I'd fully support this, and thank you for bringing it to us, Todd.
Thank you.
Yeah, there hasn't been a lot of use of that wonderful space up there, so I too am in agreement. So, gentlemen, without further discussion, we'd like to vote on this.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
The next item is the fire policy recommendations for a bundle bill agreement. Chief, you want to lead us through that?
Sure, how's it going? So basically this is to cover some unusual and one-off situations that we kind of were never originally planning on or expecting. Obviously the Summers Fire Department paramedic service is primarily intended for coverage for Summers, and we already have agreements, mutual aid agreements with all of our surrounding towns for bundle billing. Basically what that means is if you have third-party insurance, I can, both the paramedic and the transporter ambulance can send you a bill, not an issue. But if you have Medicare, Medicare has a very unique rule that says they will only accept one bill, only from the transport service. So if we do like a paramedic intercept with another town or agency, and the patient happens to have Medicare, basically that agency has to get our bill, bundle it together, and then send it to Medicare to get payment. If not, either we don't collect it or the patient gets stuck with the expenses out of pocket. So again, if the patient's a resident in town, it's not an issue. If it's from any of our surrounding communities, it's not an issue. What we kind of weren't planning or expecting originally is there have been some unique circumstances where, for example, Ellington's had multiple calls at once. A Vernon ambulance responds to Ellington to pick up a patient. They start heading to Johnson, and the patient deteriorates, and they call for a medic for assistance. And so now we find ourselves with a Summers paramedic in a Vernon ambulance with an Ellington resident. Things that we just kind of never thought about or planned out ahead of time. And conceptually, we can't just put bundle bills agreements with all the different departments of the state. There are just so many. We did something similar again. An ambulance was coming out of Suffield, which we never go to. But again, they were coming towards Johnson and happened to need a paramedic en route. So we did what needed to be done and helped them out, but the resident or the patient that got picked up now is looking at a very large out-of-pocket bill. So we're talking with our billing company and looking for recommendations from the Board of Selectmen because it's a financial matter. So basically we have three kind of options on what we want to do. The first option is you could actually do nothing, and then basically whoever that resident or that patient is that happens to be in that unfortunate circumstance is now going to be looking at probably an $800 or $900 bill for the paramedic intercept out of pocket because Medicare will not pay for it. Option two, which some towns do, is you can just completely ignore them and write them off because it's not that often. But again, that's not an option. And then the third thing that we recommended doing is our actual recommendation is, as opposed to making them pay the full bill out of pocket, we recommend that we send the patient a smaller bill but matches what Medicare would have paid us had we had a bundle bill agreement in place with Vernon Ambulance or Suffield or whatever agency happens to be a one-off that we happen to catch. So that was kind of our recommendation. So it wasn't completely writing the bill off. It wasn't handing the patient with a full bill out of pocket, but we thought we would at least try to recoup what we would have gotten had a bundle bill been in place.
How many items do we have like this, John?
We've had 3 in the last year.
Okay.
So again, it's not a huge impact, and it doesn't really directly impact Summers residents, other than the financial side on the back end.
So for the purposes of discussion, let's make a motion that we consider the option of billing a non-resident paramedic intercept the amount of $76 on the occasion when that happens.
Where did the $76 come from?
Correct. So unfortunately, that is what Medicare pays us
That's it?
if we do an intercept. So the state says your rate's $800, and Medicare says for currently year 2020 they will pay us $76.
Okay, I'll second that motion.
Okay. Additional discussion?
My only comment would I would make it that we charge them whatever Medicare we would have gotten through Medicare. So it's $76 this year. It's going to be something different next year. I just want to make sure it'll adjust with the times.
So I think we amend the motion by saying that it's whatever Medicare would have paid had it be covered, if it were covered.
Correct.
Before I agree to amend it, my only opinion on this, but it happens infrequently. My guess is it's someone who's in distress. We're talking maybe $300 a year. Does that really tip the scales? I mean, my preference would be if it's okay, we write it off and not bill anything. I mean, to me, the aggravation of billing a non-resident $76 is probably more expensive than getting the $76 back. Yeah.
Well, I personally support that situation, Tim. For 3 cases per year, and the paperwork required, and the fact we're not talking a lot of dollars here, yeah, I tend to go along with that. But that's.
And John, I presume you have to document this somehow. Can we document it with a $0 charge, just so that it's an in-kind service from the community, something along those lines?
I believe so.
I just want to make it easy.
Mike's on mute, so I'm not sure if he's got something.
Yeah, I mean, the less accounting we have to do, the better, but I understand where we have to record the activity of the paramedic and the fact that they went out on a call, so our insurance covers it, all that stuff. I don't want to put us at risk, but I hate to put somebody who's in distress anyway through another piece of aggravation over $75 or $80.
Well, how great a burden is it, this accounting for the $76 charge?
Well,
we have a third-party company that does all of it for us. It's nothing for us.
So there really is no burden. So as a matter of principle, shouldn't there be some charge? I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Tim, but I happen to also agree with Tim Patrikas. There's some charitable issues here, and issues in terms of those people perhaps that can't pay and are caught in some crisis situation. So, I mean, we can vote, but it doesn't seem like there's a big issue here in terms of the numbers of cases and the amount of dollars involved.
Yes, so
are you concerned about precedent, this being extended to other services that might be provided?
I interject. I, as the CFO, apply for those rates with the state and get the approval on that document. What I've been doing is when the billing service writes to me and says a patient is claiming hardship and cannot make a payment, should they write it off or what should they do? If they are citizens of the town, I normally would write it off or just take the Medicare payment and not the higher amount. Yeah. And if they're truly in hardship, I refer them to Allison, and then she takes care of it from that point. So in this case, I mean, as long as someone tells us, tells me, tells finance that this falls within the parameters of what you're going to vote on, that's fine. I just need an audit trail because that does get audited. So if I get a report that says there was one or two or whatever, how many, and it's been written off because of this reason, then that's fine. It's no big deal.
Okay. Brian, any comments?
I'll go ahead and amend my motion to what Mr. Keeney recommended, that we replace the dollar amount with the approved amount from Medicare. Mike, what's the smartest thing to do here? Should we bill it and write it off for an effective paper trail?
I think that leaves a trail. Yeah, I think that shows that. Yeah.
Yeah. In that case, but I'd kind of side with Tim. Let's go ahead and bill it, and then on a discretionary basis, we can entrust Mike to make the right decision for the person who's been transported.
Yeah, in deference to Tim Keeney, precedent setting is a concern also, but who knows if this goes from 3 to 10 or 15? I don't know. So, okay. So we ready to vote?
Ready?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
As amended, right? As amended to the rate that.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Make a note of that, Kim.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks for bringing it to our attention. It's the right thing to do.
Okay, the next item, gentlemen, is the fire department budget review and discussion. And Chief, you're up.
All right, let's see if I can get this to. See if I can share my screen real quick.
Ryan, you sent this fire, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I sent it to you.
Yeah, I got it. Yep, thanks. Got a lot of screens open, sorry.
All right, is that working? Sharing okay?
Yep.
Yep.
All right, cool. So I got a couple of slides real quick. Again, just our budget recap and proposal. And then also you just notice on the bottom, just pointing out, we've been kind of pushing it a little bit lately. Our department values are summed up real quick. It's just in light of everything that's been going on. When new members come in and we try and stress, page 1, policy 1 is basically we try to do the right thing and do things the right way. So that's what we've been striving for. You can't make a policy for everything, so kind of that, if in doubt, that kind of guides our operations and how we go about things. Real quick agenda, what we're doing. So recap some call statistics, what we accomplished last year in light of everything else. COVID update, not getting too much detail because obviously the long-term recovery incorporates a lot of our issues that were in there. Quick ALS update, and then go over the budget and some of the highlights and some of the questions, and then again any goals for next year. If you've got any questions, I'll be happy to entertain them at the time, any point. So real quick, budget recap, call recap for 2020, actually, sorry, I got all the data at the top. But we did 14 structure fires, 205 alarms, 49 motor vehicle accidents, 1,681 EMS calls, 193 calls for trees down, wires down, other hazardous condition services, lift assists, things of that nature. Just in comparison, in 2018, we did 1,200 calls roughly total. And then our last year, 2019 and 2020. 2020 completed, that's right, that is right. So in 2018, we did 1,200 calls. 2019, we did 1,637 calls, so it was a 30% increase. And then last year, we did 2,142 calls total, another 30% increase. So we're up over 65% in like 2 years. Combination of ALS, but also COVID, and we've had several storms. We had an Isaias come through, which kept us busy for several weeks. So we've just had a lot of things going on. We actually looked at all the call categories. All the categories except for auto accidents have gone up. Auto accidents is the one area that's gone down, thanks to smarter cars and also fewer people on the road this last year.
Yeah.
Some call trends, so you can see kind of where we're spending our time and effort. As I said, fire is actually not going away. It's growing slowly. Service calls are going up, but EMS is absolutely dominating the picture of what we're doing and how we're doing it. The need for that type of service has literally gone through the roof. Some goals that we had, so I'm going to go over the goals that we actually presented last year and kind of touch on where we left off and how we made out. One of our main goals was filling open positions, and I'd say it was 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. So we hired 2, and we've had 3 leaves, and we've got 1 on long-term disability. So not work-related, but he's out on injury, so that has actually left me with fewer bodies in the seats right now than when we started. So struggling a little bit. I mean, we're answering the calls, we're covering the shifts, but it definitely has hit on like our overtime. One of our goals last year was to definitely improve consistency on our ALS program. We've brought in a lot of different providers from different agencies. I think we've done a lot of good work in standardizing training, policies, procedures, protocols, just how we run the calls. We've had plenty of practice this last year, so I think that's definitely made some great strides forward. We did bring in a third-party auditing firm, as you recall, last year, and they've been great working with us and pointing out best practices and what we can improve and catching a lot of little things and improving our documentation, so that definitely has been helping us out. We expanded the fire training site out back. Again, this was kind of fortuitous a little bit. We had talked about building and having our own training facilities out back, which was great. When COVID hit, the state shut down all of their formal training sites. So while we couldn't do as much as at the big sites, the big facilities that Hartford or Willimantic can do, we were at least able to do something with small groups and at least get out there, pull some hose lines, do like room and contents fire, do some company level operation and training. That really has allowed us to keep our members kind of sharp and in the right mindset, which I think has helped us out incredibly, given the fact that with COVID, we couldn't go anywhere else. One of the things that we wanted to do last year was expand into what we call rapid sequence intubation, advanced airways and things like that. But that is tied to being able to do training in the emergency rooms and the hospitals, and that's all on hold due to COVID, and I honestly don't think that's going to be opened back up for another year or so. So that's going to continue to hold off. One project that we had started last year and we were able to complete before COVID kind of got in the way was we wanted to get more involved with what we call the tactical EMS. So if there was an active aggressor, could we respond in an appropriate manner with the police? So similar training, equipment, procedures, things like that. We did have a training group come in. We got 14 of our members up and trained. All of our medics are currently trained. So God forbid if there's ever that type of incident here or in a surrounding community, we know what to do and we've got the proper, unfortunately, but we have to wear nowadays body armor. But if we need it, we've got it. So unfortunately, a sign of the times. Knock on wood, again, obviously there hasn't been any major school shootings, but schools also haven't been in session. So that's one of the kind of the concerns that when everybody goes back and people are kind of pent up and stressed, that nationwide they might see more of these again, so we've got to be prepared. And then the big thing again that obviously we kind of said we'd help out Glenn and take on some of the EMD operations and support him in whatever way he needed. That sounded great back in December, February, and then March hit and COVID hit, and so, but we've definitely stepped forward, but there's been a lot of work done to support that, whether it's we sending people down with the trucks and equipment to picking up supplies and inventory. As Glenn had pointed out, we've got literally now a small warehouse full of items, but we've had to inventory it, maintain it, rotate the stock, get it out to people that need it, whether it be town departments or some of the local businesses. So we've been doing a lot of work to help integrate and support that department as well. COVID-19, again, we talked about the Long-Term Recovery Committee. A lot of this is in their report. PPE was a big thing for us. Luckily, we were able to get a kind of a jump start on that. Cleaning also became a big issue for us. Decontaminating the ambulances. Obviously, if you got a sick patient, we want to make sure that it doesn't spread to the next patient. So we got a lot of our members, actually, I do give them credit for stepping up and coming some real creative ways of using paint sprayers and pneumatic solutions and basically fogging the ambulances between calls. Actually turned out to be so effective now doing the senior buses on a regular basis as well, because it seems to be working it real well. We've got a lot of impact with the prisons. Response model has definitely changed. In the past, it had been get as many people to the scene as we could so that we could all help out, and it was a great training opportunity. And again, many hands make for light work. But now that we're dealing with the COVID situation, a lot of times we're saying, hey, can we handle that call with just 2 people on the scene, just on the ambulance? Can we minimize it? It's made it a challenge for some training. It's made it hard for kind of volunteer recruitment, retention. It's also made it hard for the providers in a lot of ways, because as opposed to having 4 people help lift the patient and all the equipment and the gear that needs to go in and out, it's just you and your one partner now. So we're trying to balance that on a continuous basis. And that has obviously had a huge impact on our day-to-day operations behind the scenes. So we really do miss having like the department meetings where we get everybody together, the training operations. Yes, we can do small groups, but the online training is just not the same for firefighting. A lot of what we do is hands-on skills. It's the rescue, the patient, hands-on people and patients. It's that interaction, and we're kind of still struggling to work through some of that. Other hurdles that we've been working through this last year, obviously, is some staffing shortages. We've continued to have some turnover, especially in some of the part-time positions. As I said, we also have, unfortunately, 1 member out on long-term disability. But it's not something that an easy problem that we can fix, but I will be coming back on February 4th with some more discussions on personnel, so that's going to be kind of a separate. I'm not going to go too much into it tonight. But on the selectmen's meeting on the 4th, we definitely are to sit down and talk about some of what I have for positions. Is, again, remember, we brought one of my part-timers on as a temporary full-time employee, hoping that it would cover the gap, and that 6 months is basically up. So we need to have some discussions on what we want to do and how we want to move forward. So I said, with staffing, it has made it hard. Extra calls, longer runs. Even also just on a larger scale statewide, everybody's getting busier, so the paramedics are kind of in higher demand. A lot of the older paramedics that were in the state that could retire said, I'm done, and left. I can't blame them. And at the same time, all the schools shut down, so the pipeline coming into feeding on the back end dried up for a year. So it's not just us, but we don't have new medics coming out of the programs as we used to, and the older people are retiring if they can help it. So it just put a strain on getting resources and getting the skills and the right people in the right mix. We run a fairly unique operation here, I gotta say that. It's not a bad thing, but it's just we have a lot more expectations of our members, I would say. And so just trying to get the right people in the door has been a challenge. Similarly, as I said, it's not just been us, but the commercial providers have all had staffing issues themselves. And so they've pulled their services back to what their core regions are. So ASM used to have an ambulance up at Johnson most of the time. That's basically gone away because they need that truck to cover East Hartford, Manchester, and some of their core areas. AMR used to have backfill multiple medics. With the Rockville medic would go out, they'd backfill. That hasn't been happening because AMR can't afford to pull anybody else out of Hartford. Springfield AMR used to cover East Longmeadow. They've pulled back as well. East Longmeadow for a while there was really hurting for coverage and needed our help. So it's been kind of a regional thing where the call volume is just not real high in this area, but it's enough to put a little bit of a challenge on us. So jumping into the budget highlights, high level. FY21 budget that we have currently approved was a little over $1,580,000 or $480,000. The proposed budget is about a 5% increase, which I'll go over some of the high-level increases. Total dollar amount is $54,000 increase. It's proposed 5%. And then, real quick, just also not quite sure where Brian and I were talking. We're not quite sure where this year is going to be. But I do want to bring in that the EMS revenues has offsetted in the past quite a bit of where we've been. It had historically been about $200,000 a year Last year, obviously they did a one-time sweep to get a lot more. We don't think there's going to be quite that much this year, but 300,000 to 400,000 should be there, so at least it will help offset some of the costs.
John, why is that declining? Given
so last year there was a little bit more in the fund that they didn't clean it out completely every year, so there was a kind of like a little bit of a rolling balance. And last year they basically did a full sweep. Ryan will back me up on that, I believe. But they took almost as much as they could out of the account. And we said right off the bat that was a one-time. So in 16, 17, 18, there may have been a little bit left in the account every year, and last year they basically cleaned it out.
Are you talking about the town sweeping the budget?
So the EMS revenue.
Talking about the finance department sweeping budget, we use it.
Kim.
Sweeping the ambulance fund.
Trying to get in. Jeff Cole.
Yep. Yeah, I remember that conversation. John, just a real quick question before you go too much further. With a 30% increase in call volume, I know it's not a one-to-one increase in what the expenses are, but 5 seems a little light. So as you go through these highlights, if you're concerned that we're short budgeting something, let me know, because with that increase of call volume and the offset money, we should make sure that you're well covered on these high items. So I'd like your opinion on those beyond the number.
Yep. So first line item that were the big bulk of the changes that we recommended there's actually salary. It is the full-timers are in a union. We are entering this July will be year 3 of a 3-year contract. So I wouldn't say we can have a lot of leeway here. It's basically locked in for what we've got. I did give a full breakdown of where I believe each of the members is going to be for step increases and pay raises based on length of service and their certifications from Brian's. That's actually in the budget and all of the charted out. But that basically allows Brian to go right into the union contract and can match up. Okay, so firefighter Stowell, yes, he's been here this many years. He's got these certs. That's the pay rate that should be there. So it's basically pretty cut and dry for the most of the full-time members. So we try to incorporate that. That's I think 36,000 of the 50,000 or so in increases. We're not at this point in time proposing adding any full-time staff. I honestly have open positions. The hard part's getting the bodies in. What I am doing I've got some part-timers that are going to be leaving EMTs. Luckily for them, they actually found full-time employment elsewhere. They kind of been using this as a part-time as a stopgap. So kudos to them for finding full-time. But as they leave here, we're going to be looking to replace those part-time EMT hours with part-time paramedic hours. So it won't change the head count or the hours, but obviously the paramedics get paid at a higher rate. So that would be my recommendation there. Part-time pay raises, we do have some flexibility on. My thought was to keep it somewhat consistent with the union contract and roughly in the same percentage or same ballpark and kind of moving everybody up at the same tiers.
John, I want to ask you a question. You're saying you don't not propose any additional staff increases, but you have a 65% increase in calls. We're concerned about the long-term recovery committee's recommendation on stress. Is this going to add more to these issues and problems, or should we consider another person?
Yeah, I hear you. So I guess long-term, I need to fill my open spots.
Yeah.
And long-term, the way we're going to get to that is we're going to have to raise the base pay. We've got a lot of people that said we're interested, but we're just not going to do it for $22 or $23 an hour. When surrounding departments are $27, $28, $30 an hour. But we are kind of in year 3 of contract, so I don't know if that's something that the town wants to tackle right now, reopening the contract just to increase the pay raises so we can help fill the position.
I don't think that's a good idea, opening
Right.
that contract.
So, as I said, I think I'm kind of a little bit stuck for a year. I wish I'd be honest with you. I wish I could do a little bit more, but I have the open positions. And as I said, we've got some other personnel issues that we're going to have to talk about in a couple weeks, just due to some changes. But again, finding the right quality members has been my bigger challenge. Yeah. So it's not that I don't have the hours budgeted or available. I'm having a hard time getting the right people in those seats.
John, do you ever look at the people with military experience in the as medics?
Yes, we have, and actually we've had good luck with that. One of the last people that we hired, Jeff Green, is excellent, and he's come in with Air National Guard experience. The downside I just found out is that he's now going to be deployed for 6 months starting in June. So obviously we're going to hold his spot as well, but again, so that goes back to that 2 steps forward or 1 step forward, 2 steps back. I've got Jeff. Jeff's actually been an incredible asset, and he's coming along very nicely.
What about people that have done their tour in the military and have gotten out, but have had terrific training in the meantime?
Yeah, and so I'd love to find them, and we'd love to get them. We've got several with military backgrounds, and we've had very good luck with that. As I said, a lot of it comes down to the pay rate. But with the contract where it is, my hands are a little bit tied for the next year. But definitely something that this time next year, when we reopen the contract negotiations, that I do going to let's remember this discussion this time next year when we
Good point.
start talking about that. I'd love to, as I said, it definitely is. I won't lie, it's a recruitment and retention issue. It definitely is affecting me. And the town has been trying to make strides, and I think the employees that we have now, we've gotten that because they realize that the town has been making a good faith effort. The base pay is going up roughly 5% this year, which is a significant percent increase. I get it on the surface when you look at it just at a percent basis. But when you start at like literally the lowest starting paramedic rate for a union paramedic in the state of Connecticut, going up 5% is it's a step in the right direction, but it's still behind everybody else, if that makes sense. So we are trying to balance how do we take logical and incremental steps that the town can afford that is appropriate for obviously the citizens, while at the same time allowing us to recruit and retain the right members.
The long-range emergency planning committee again recommended that there be some kind of stress management testing done for personnel that are involved with fire and EMS initially. Could you look in to see what that might cost? And
absolutely. Yeah, I'll have to sit with the committee a little bit. I have absolutely 100% of support of doing the surveys and things like that. I just want to make sure that when we get the results back that we have a means to take action on it if we notice or identify any issues. So I'd hate to take a survey, find that we have problems or people are needing mental health resources and not having that lined up. I think that would be kind of a false leader for a lot of our members. So I want to make sure that all of it's in place.
Yeah.
There's also some concern for liability if there's a problem and it's not identified and before you have a much bigger problem.
Understood. Yep.
Okay.
And so another notable increase, again, increase percentage-wise, not necessarily in dollar-wise, was for overtime. Again, combination of increases in base pay. So if your base pay goes up, your overtime goes up at the same time. Also, we have noticed that with the turnover, it takes a lot longer to get a paramedic up to speed to the point where we can just release them on their own. So there's a high level of amount of time they've got to spend with the other medics, but also just comfortable with our trucks, our equipment. And again, we've got a unique service area that we don't want to necessarily just say, hey, on nights and weekends, you're free to go off on your own when literally you're the only one in the building and you don't have that support network of another medic or another senior personnel that you can rely on. So our volunteers are great, but at the same time, we do want to start with all of our new members for several months, Monday through Friday. So if somebody leaves that could work 24/7, we bring a new person on. The new person that comes on, they still can only work Monday through Friday. So that's leaving us some holes on nights and weekends. So that's why we're trying to account for that with the overtime. Volunteer stipends is going up slightly. Again, that's strictly based on call volume. A lot of our volunteers get basically like a gas allowance or a reimbursement for like a couple of dollars per call. So if you go from 1,600 calls to 2,000 calls, there's more calls, they're going to get more reimbursement. So that's an area that we just need to. Their per call amounts and stipends are staying the same. It's just more of a equalizing it out. We've got more calls, so we need to cover that a little bit better. Technology is definitely going up, so we've got some security cameras we had to put in for liability, but also because we do have narcotics in the facility. We also now have an ambulance across the street in another garage, so we want to be able to keep an eye on that for a number of obvious reasons. So the security cameras have subscription costs that went up. And then also we use software called ESO. They were originally, it was Firehouse. They've been bought out, and they are migrating everybody from our old Firehouse platform to the new ESO platform. And of course, there's a cost increase and migration charges that are associated with that. Then the last item that has a notable increase, probably one of the largest percent increases, is medical supplies. This one was a 26 or 27% increase. And again, this does directly correlate to increased calls. So this said, yes, the call volume is going up 30%. Disposable supplies, this is going to be almost like a one-to-one. So these are going to be your Band-Aids, your bandages, your oxygen masks. If the truck's rolling out the door that more often, then absolutely we're going to use that much more disposable items. So those were the major changes in the line items. There were a lot of line items with $100 here, or we tried reducing one or two by like a couple $100, but not any notable changes. But if you have any questions on any of them, I'd be happy to go through that.
I think the key point here, and I think it's already been indicated, is that the ambulance fund probably contributes about 50%, Brian, to the overall operating cost of the fire department. Is that about right?
Last year we had a large sweep in that did cover about 50%. Historically, it's been in the 30% range, and realistically, it'll probably plateau around the 40% range going forward. As call volume does go up, yes, more revenue comes in because of that, but also so do the expenses. And I realistically, there's no way that it'll ever be 50% year over year contribution. It's just, it's not possible.
Okay.
But 40% is probably a realistic goal.
Sorry, John.
No problem. Before I get into the CFP, any questions on the specific line item budget?
No, it looked pretty solid, John. Thanks for all the details.
I'm trying to get in.
Yeah, your microphone's really quiet, Mike. What?
It is?
Yeah.
Is it any? I'll just try to get closer to it.
Yeah, that's better.
A little bit better?
Yeah.
I think maybe I'm looking at this a little bit differently, and so bear with me. And I'm looking at regular salaries, I'm looking at overtime, and I'm looking at the volunteer stipend. It seems to me, and it is fairly well documented, that turnover is an issue, and you have lapses of time in between when a position is filled. Therefore, you kind of have budgeted dollars sitting there with no active employee to pay them to. And so my thought is, you really don't need the $35,500 in the line item. I know you're saying you have a union contract. I know you're saying you have percentage raises. I don't have a problem with that. I'm disassociating that with your line item. I don't think your line item needs to go up $35,500 if you're not always at full staff for the full year. Likewise, same thing with the stipends. You run into the same situation there. I can't remember ever going over at the end of a year in terms of actual versus budget. I would think you could budget that flat also. And then the overtime, I think you're proposing $1,900. I would think you should be able to, in 1 year, manage $1,900 of overtime out of a budget. So if you were to eliminate those three increases, you would have like a 1% increase in your budget. And I have no problem with the rest of the budget.
Yeah, I guess my only fear with the primary, the main salary, well, a couple things. So the main salaries would be if for whatever reason people started applying or I was able to get people in May or June, come July 1st, I wouldn't be able to keep them or hire them. Because the budget wouldn't be allocated.
Correct.
So I'd be kind of chasing myself. Yeah. On the overtime issue, not without getting into too many details on personal specifics, but I know for a fact that the person that's on long-term disability probably will not be back until September or October. So I'm going to be holding his position open.
Right there,
there's going to be overtime there, but yes, I can.
Well, right
could
there,
factor in his salary for those 3 months.
But right there, you're admitting you don't have a salary line item obligation for the person that's out on long-term disability.
Yep.
So that's why I'm saying your salary line item, you could probably go flat and manage that without increasing it.
The issue's timing, right, John?
Yeah, I would hate to, so I mean, yes, I probably could scale it back if I take into account when I believe the long-term disability person's going to be out for, and I can make some adjustments there. It was just the other positions, and I think actually it would be worth, I don't know when you need final numbers, but I think February 4th I've talked with Bud separately, and Kim knows where I'm going with this. Yeah. We are going to have some personnel discussions and changes on February 4th, and I think in executive session.
Yeah.
And I think that might be the time for us to hash some of that out when it's a little bit more one-on-one. We can talk about specifics, names, salaries, things like that.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I'm not opposed to that.
That's a good boy. I just love him.
What's the harm? What's the harm, Mike? What's the harm in keeping the money in the budget? And if it's not spent, where's the loss?
The loss is you're taxing people for something that's not being used. So that's my.
At the end of the day, if it drives a tax increase,
I'm trying to bring a lean budget to the taxpayers, one that will be able to weather any kind of revenue storm that may be in the offing. I'm not sure. If revenue's not an issue, then this won't be an issue.
And at the end of the year, if there's excess funds, what happens to those?
Obviously, they go back into fund balance.
Yeah. Thank you.
And then, to be honest, the other thing that we can talk about or discuss related to the overtime would also be that we can have as a conversation is how much of the overtime may or may not be allowable as a COVID-related expense.
I wouldn't be budging anything for COVID because I think we're going to have enough of COVID relief. We should just be doing an operating budget. And that goes for supplies, and that goes for your number of calls also. Okay. I know your calls are increased because a lot of it is COVID-related. And if those supplies are COVID-related, we're going to be able to get relief. We're going to be able to get reimbursement on all that. So we shouldn't be putting it in the budget per se. I would probably recommend that you put supplies as a flat line item too.
Yeah, I don't see our call numbers going down.
Right. But Mike's got a good point here. From what we're hearing from the government is that most, if not all, of these costs are going to be covered. And how much we've got so far, Brian? Well, in excess of what, 97,000 or?
We got 91,000 from the state. We've received, or we've applied for and been granted. We haven't received yet because the federal government moves slower than molasses on a cold December morning. But we have, we're waiting 49,000 from FEMA relief right now. And that's for costs through June 30, 2020. That doesn't include any costs for the current fiscal year we're in.
John, can you track the COVID expenses in terms of calls?
Yeah, he does have accounting to track his COVID costs, so it's not a problem. He can go over in his account.
Well, again, I think
that's fine. It'll be taken care of by a grant. So no one, he's managing fine.
Well, whether it's compensated for by a grant or by taxes or by state reimbursement is secondary to the fact that he's got to control an expense, and I don't want to hamstring him. You know, kind of to Tim's point, just because it's budgeted doesn't mean it needs to be spent.
Correct.
But if John believes he needs to eventually fill those seats, accommodating for it in the budget would be good. But you know, my thing would be if you want to create a separate line item for medical supplies potentially reimbursed outside of the regular medical supply line,
How
that's
much was
fine.
that
But
line
it seems to me that I'd hate for us to be understaffed or undersupplied if we have to respond. How that gets paid for is a separate discussion.
I agree.
Good. So just as a heads up, you got the formal CIP. We still have to vet through CIP, and we're still working on some of these. And numbers are. We're also looking at some grant ideas, but at a high level, what we're looking for CIP this year, we are not looking to replace any vehicles or any of the rolling stock. We're actually in good shape there. We're looking to continue the station repair projects that have been ongoing. A smaller amount this year, focused on the HVAC repairs and again the hydrant for water pressure. Again, we were looking to do that last year, but some of that got put on hold because Connecticut Water wasn't doing any repairs because of COVID. So we used that funding to do other repairs within the station that were on the original hit list. We did move forward with quite a bit of repairs around the station. We just didn't get to those two items that still need to be done. HVAC controls, we're talking about automation of some of the air circulating systems in particular. So as Todd has mentioned in the past, when we first got here a couple of years, like 5-6 years ago, actually the air recycling system was physically broken. We've got it up and running, but right now it is basically there. All the heat is on or all the heat is off. So we're trying to get it a little bit regulated a little bit better. We are looking for cardiac monitor. This is something we talked about before that had already gone through. If we can get grant funding in the short term, which I'm still working on, that would allow us to run all 3 ALS medics if the need arises. Right now, just for everybody's reference, we've got 2 new Zoll monitors, 2 very old LifePak monitors. In July, the 2 LifePaks reached end of life, which means they will not be allowed to do electrical therapy safely or kind of insured. So I wouldn't want to use them for critical patients because basically the vendor has said, as of July 1st, we're no longer going to service them, support them, maintain them, test them. So we do want to at least get something else to at least make sure that we can run all 3 medics. As we said, there are times when we have had 3 medics on the road at the same time, myself and a couple others. And then the last thing that we are looking for is the air packs. Several years ago, we were asked to avoid getting the large shocks of we need like $500,000 to replace all the air packs at once. So what we've done is kind of peanut butter spread it out. So it's roughly 1/4 of all of our packs every 4 years, and that way they rotate through. And after 20 years, they're supposed to be retired. 18 to 20 years, they're supposed to be retired by OSHA. So we've got a lot of packs that are reaching that point. So this is just a continuation of that program that we had worked with CIP and the Board of Finance to set up several years ago. So 4 years ago, we had bought 6 packs, and 4 years before that, they had bought like 5 or 6 packs. So we're trying to continue that cycle so that way we stay in sync and don't get back in the bind where we're scrambling with a lot of expired equipment. That's what I've got for CIP on the high-level plan where we're looking to go.
On the cardiac monitor, wasn't there prior approval of that?
Correct, but it was contingent on if we can get a grant. So we're still working on it. We haven't gotten grant funding yet. It was back and forth. We're still trying to see whether or not that would be a COVID-related expense. Originally it was possibly it could be. Some clarification that said maybe not. And now I've talked to somebody else in the state. They said it might be again, but until we get it in writing, I was told to hold off on ordering. So other than finance, the other kind of our goals for this upcoming year, obviously COVID is, hopefully we've got the light at the end of the tunnel, the summer, fall time. But for our members, it's just obviously upended a lot of what we normally do, our training, our meetings, our inspections, community outreach. I mean, we really miss being able to go into the schools, going into the senior centers, working outreach with the public. Obviously, a lot of activities have been put on hold, so we want to kind of get back into our new normal, as I want to say. And then in the last 4 or 5 years, we've brought in the fire marshal, the EMD, ALS. We've had a lot of pieces come in, and then we kind of dropped COVID on top of it. So we still need to figure out our daily routines, getting back into a normal operation. And then the last part of it, obviously, is trying to fill our vacancies. I was pointed on some of the career issues, but even on the volunteer side, 2 years ago we had like 20 members apply. This last year, because of COVID, we only had 8. So, and we've lost a few more as well because members had personal health issues or medical issues. They didn't want to take the risk, where they had somebody at home that was they were a volunteer, and they had somebody at home that was high health risk, and so they had to step down. So we've probably gone from 80 active volunteers to about 65. And so that's something that we want to keep an eye on and see what we can do to reverse that trend. But that's definitely going to take some work and some effort. That's what I've got for that. Any questions?
Found anything you need that you haven't asked for in there?
I think we're in pretty good shape right now. As I said, the hard part right now has definitely been getting people in the door.
Great, thank you.
If you did need additional funds for the stress management testing baseline information, where would it go in the budget? Under
Training.
health services?
I would believe it would go under health services.
Health services. Thank you.
Which brings up a point. Should that be something we should consider budgeting based upon the timing?
Well, I guess, that might be something we want to do town-wide, but does CIRMA or one of the other organizations we belong to, do they have an EAP referral that we could become part of? I know those are very popular. Ours is exceptional at work, and it's at least the place where employees can go to get a referral to someplace that might specialize. But it's a very low-cost benefit we provide to our employees at work, and if there's something similar at the municipal level that we could look at and consider budgeting for the whole town, it's a thing. It's a necessary item these days.
Yeah, I will say that the town of Summers does offer it. Yes. I believe it's through the Lexington group. Yes. So we have that made that information available to our members. As part of the long-term recovery, I can share it out. We actually went through and found a list of probably 10 or 12 different agencies that offer voluntary outreach support. So if you contacted, there's a state CISD team, there's IAFF for the career members has like a peer support team. There's a statewide EMS council that offers peer support. But obviously, to Tim Keeney's point and the doctor's point, they currently involve initiative of the member reaching out and saying, "Hey, I've got a problem and I need help." What we're looking to do is what we don't have right now is a little more proactive of screening of the members in-house. I'm in support of that. The other thing that we do have is, I will say, we do have the Lexington group, which is the kind of the KERMA or the municipal peer EAP program. It's a great, decent resource for most town employees. Having talked to other departments or other people that have used it a little bit, they're not public safety specific.
Oh yeah, okay.
So sometimes when some of the firefighters want to go in there and they want to talk about doing CPR on a little kid, the counselors just aren't equipped for some of the situations that we're facing.
Yeah, I'll bet. Good point, John. Thank you.
So we are looking into seeing if there are, or trying to get our numbers. There are some departments around us that have done more research on that, so we're trying to not reinvent the wheel, but figure out what those programs might be that we can look into.
I can understand what Tim Patricius was referring to as possibly a town-wide,
Find out from
league-wide.
Anthem whether or not they offer a specialized program in that regard.
Mike, you have to speak up. We can't hear you.
I said with the town insurance with Anthem, I think we do have EAP, we do have that kind of service. I'm not sure it's specialized. Maybe we can inquire to find out if they do offer something like that.
Good point.
Would they offer to any insured employee?
Yep.
Well,
So that works well for the career staff. We also have to make sure that we include our volunteers.
Right.
Again,
That wouldn't work for the volunteers.
No.
No.
as the chief mentioned, I think it's important to consider to be proactive in this area, and particularly with regards to stress management testing, fire and EMS have got to be the highest priority. You shouldn't wait until we get a program for all town employees. I think if you can identify
Well, the
something that's
EAP, the
worthwhile, I
Lexington
think we need
group,
to jump
does
on it.
cover all town employees and volunteers, I believe. So,
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to that, Tim. If the right thing can be found, we can work it into the budget.
Okay.
So, John, you'll explore some options for us in that regard then?
Yes, I will.
Okay. Any additional questions on the budget as presented?
Great presentation.
Yeah, well done. Well done again.
Thank you.
Mike, you want to weigh in here? Mike?
Yeah, I thought he did a great job. My issues were with those items. I have no question.
No, I understand, and that's something we'll consider, okay? And we're going to meet on the 4th and discuss these other issues as it relates to personnel and how it impacts staffing. All right. All right, thank you, John.
Thank you.
Brian, the next item is the proposed referendum schedule.
Yeah, so every year you guys have to set the town meeting and budget referendum dates so that the Board of Finance is able to go by those guidelines to set when their public hearing has to be so that they know also when the budget has to be completed by. Looking back on prior years and basing it off what the charter says, Dan Logan, her and I agreed on these dates for the town meeting to be held on a Tuesday, May 4th at 7 p.m. And then the following week, the budget referendum on May 11th. She posed an interesting question as far as COVID goes. Will we be able to even have a town meeting and a budget referendum this year? We didn't last year. I told her the same thing that I'm going to tell you guys. I don't know yet. We'll find out. As far as I know, those emergency orders are not in effect anymore. We were able to vote in November, so I don't know why we couldn't vote in May. But I guess we will see. But in the meantime, you guys would have to approve the schedule.
Yeah, if we adopt a schedule,
Probably a
we can always,
hybrid.
we can always
Probably
back
you
it.
cannot have it, right? But you can have an election. So we need to clarify that with the town attorney.
Clarifying whether or not we can hold an election on these dates. That's what you're saying, Mike.
I think we can hold the election. I just don't think we can congregate in the town meeting. So,
Okay.
you can do that. Zoom.
But even if it was a virtual meeting, it would have to be warned.
Right.
So if we approve the
Yeah.
schedule tonight,
Yeah.
we can always modify it in future weeks, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We should set the
Absolutely.
dates.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve these, agree on these proposed dates of May 4th for the town meeting and May 11th for the budget referendum.
I'll second the motion.
Yeah, I think we also have to find out here with Mike in terms of the parameters associated with that. We can address that once we set the dates, okay?
Before we approve the motion, can we include in that town meeting May 4 date that it would be virtual anyway? We'll have a virtual
Right.
option.
Sure.
So even if we have live, we should have a virtual option for
Correct.
people who elect to
Right.
participate. That way we should be set up for that.
Yep.
Right.
Just making more work for me, Tim.
That's what I do, brother. Job security.
So you amended the motion as such, and so we're ready to vote on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. In the meantime, we'll reach out to Carl, our town attorney, and get his assessment. Okay? Next item is the authorization of payments. I think both you gentlemen received this.
I didn't receive my weekly phone call, Mr. Keeney. I was disappointed.
Yeah, I had a very busy day today, but I do have a minor question here.
You're going to have to give me a few minutes. My software's got to load.
Okay. Maybe you can do it off the top of your head, because it's just a question of, if you could just explain the two different water bills, the Connecticut Water Company and the Hazardville Water.
I think Todd can explain that better than I can. Todd, there you are.
We have two different water companies in town.
Yeah.
And this is probably for the fire hydrants.
Oh, yeah.
Connecticut Water gets lion's share. Hazardville Water is the west part of town.
Right.
That comes in on Cordwood and also on 190. So we get billed separately for these different water systems. Now they're all interconnected, but every fire plug is billed differently.
That's what I thought.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The only question I had, Brian, is who is Cargill Incorporated and why do they have two big checks?
Who?
Cargill? That's also Todd.
Yeah. Water.
That is our road salt. That's our treated road salt that we get for the roads, and we keep our barns full. We came into the season not quite full, and we did have some storms in December, so we used some salt. We have the way the salt contracts work is I contract 1,000 tons a year with Cargill.
Yep.
We have to buy 500. We are able to buy up to 1,500, depending on the winter. We've gone up, we're at 525 or something like that. So our contract with them is fulfilled unless we get a big winter and we have to resupply, but we're good there. We have another supplier. It's a different one this year that we're trying. I always like to contract with two different suppliers, so we don't have the problem we did 6 years ago when everybody ran out of salt and we had to get some from the state. We get 500 from them, so we have to buy 250. We can buy up to 750. Same thing. It's a 50-50 split on either side. We haven't purchased any from them yet. We have the space if we need to, and winter doesn't happen. That's so far so good. But I would imagine we're going to have some winter storms in February and March, so we will be getting some from them at some point.
So there's two separate payments a week apart. Both are kind of substantial. Is that legit? There's two separate invoices.
Yes, because the way it works with Cargill is their drop zone for us is in Westfield, and the West is a separate vendor, a subcontractor. They do all the trucking. So when I ordered it, they'll send me 200 tons or 150, and then they might get busy somewhere else. So they invoice daily, like everybody does. So
okay,
whenever they fit, we get the next invoice.
Thanks.
Yep.
And on page 3, you've got it's a vendor code 16129 Everbridge, $7,004. Is that reimbursable money?
We are receiving the Emergency Management Preparedness Grant for that. At this time, I don't know what that amount of funding will be. I don't know, Glenn, I don't know if you heard for sure if it'll be 100% covered or if it's going to, will we get 5,000 and we eat I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything as far as that grant goes yet.
I know they did say that Everbridge was covered underneath that, but I don't know what the reimbursement rate will be.
Correct, exactly. I don't know what it is either.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to make a motion that we approve payment authorization for $277,508.78.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
With your approval, gentlemen, I'm going to sign this. Okay?
Okay.
Thanks, Bud.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Brian.
The last item is, unless you gentlemen have additional items to add, but Brian, you're going to tell us about the transfer items. I sent a note on this.
As I'm playing catch up in my basement, I found Mike and I were discussing some items, and we realized that the transfers for the separation payouts of 3 employees who had left during the year, the transfer to separation payout to cover those costs had not been made, and so I typed this up and emailed it to you guys. This would be a transfer of $52,385.37 from land use regular salaries to cover Jeff Ford's payouts, $12,357.80 to cover Chris Boucher's payouts, and $1,814.25 from part-time police to cover Jay Gershowitz's payouts. We would transfer all that to separation payout. Total is $66,557.42.
A motion that we accept the transfers as presented.
Second motion.
Okay, we'll present these to the Board of Finance. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any additional items to be added, gentlemen?
None for me.
Not for me.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks. Thanks again for
Thank you
everybody's
all.
participation.
All right. Good meeting.
Special meeting next week, bud?
Yes.
Yes.
Thursday.
Yeah, so next week we're going to do all town hall offices, police, and I'm going to give you guys a current roster of salaries and let you begin discussing amongst the three of you kind of where you want to go with any increases.
Okay.
Okey-dokey.
All
Thanks.
right?
Yep,
All right.
see you then.
Be safe.
Hey, go Bucks on Sunday.
Woohoo! Go Friday!
Hey, Brian, if they lose you, you still going to come into the office on Monday?
I'm not going to make any promises.
Okay.
Well, we miss you and we look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, hopefully I will be there Monday.
Okay.
Fingers
Great.
crossed.
Good luck, Brian.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yep, hold on. Here, continue.